I mean, I don't know. Is it working?
We are.
We're in a whole new world, man.
It's April Fool's.
I clicked my wheels 3 times and we appeared here in the lab.
You're not in Kansas anymore?
Right on, man. Right on. So what are we doing today?
Well, we're answering questions like we normally do on Mondays. We give away some stuff too, but we're in the lab, so you'll probably hear some echoes, probably hear some background noise of pumps running and all kinds of tests going on. Because this is actively a testing area, which I have to do right at 4. So when we get done, go back to testing.
I got 4 too, man. Meetings.
So,
all right.
But we got stuff to give away too.
Start off. You do one, man. Do the first one.
Well, I mean, they probably wish they put more in their cart, so I apologize that the one I get to finally do after a few weeks is only $16.99, but that's all he had in his cart. So, Bill, put more in your cart next time. But Bill's from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and he had a 3/4-inch swing check valve True Union in his shopping cart, and now he can go pick that up
free
for free.
Swing valve. Right on, man. Awesome. And over Robert Everett in Sanibel, Texas, is getting a 100 PX 790 gallon per hour Pan World pump for $194.99.
Those are pretty common in
almost $200 pump.
Water change stations. Those
You know what? I used a ton of these on old propagation system that I had.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, awesome, man.
Cool, Robert.
Yeah, cool, dude. Right on. So for those of you who don't know, put some stuff in your cart, buy it. Either way, become a preferred reefer, and we'll give some of this stuff away every Monday.
For sure.
So moving on. Some of these days, man, I feel like super prepared for what we're going to talk.
Right.
Some of them we just wing it. Today.
Today's a wing day.
Like I just showed up. I had some long interviews that we had to do, and boom, here I am. So a couple of things we moved in here, man, just because I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of the tests that were going on behind us, answer any questions that people have. We also have some questions queued up if, like, for whatever reason you guys are super boring and don't answer anything fun. We will go back to those.
Yeah.
But let's just start off with a little bit of what's going on behind us. And if you guys got questions, man, let's answer them. So sadly, we don't have like an actual shot of each one of these tanks, you know, but like for you to see.
It's coming along though. We probably should see results soon, right?
Yeah, yep, this is camera. All right, so these two right here, just for those of you who don't know, these two tanks, this one, and then the one you can't see,
one over here off the
is the evolution of the elevated tank or elevated parameter.
Yeah,
test.
that's where we took we have 2 episodes before it. One was some initial results that we saw where you just wanted to update people on it, and then the other one we actually put down some even more results that we saw. And then the next evolution was to take these. We used the Red Sea Coral Pro elevated levels and the Red Sea Blue Bucket, like more what you would call common levels, I guess, for people, you know, alkalinity and calcium. But we are purposefully maintaining high levels here and low level and more standardized levels here, and this is when we actually get to do it in a reef tank like you would have in your home.
I'm shooting it from the hip here a little bit, but I believe it's like 420 calcium versus like 460, you know, 1320 magnesium versus 1400, and then the biggest thing is probably the alkalinity, which is like 8 versus 12.
Yeah.
So 8 versus 12 on alkalinity means you've increased the amount of available carbonate or alkalinity by 50%. So the calcium is like 10%.
Yeah.
So I think the carbonate is probably going to be the alkalinity is probably going to be the big tell here. Mm-hmm. But do you remember what we saw in the last one?
Well, we had frags on like the frag racks, so we kind of weighed them, different weights, and actual just visual representation size-wise. There were some color differences too, but there was some undeniable like results with more growth, especially on like the chalices and stuff. They were plating out further than the lower levels, so definitely looked like high alk and high calcium were
coloration also
solid.
Like the coloration was better at high alkalinities and calcium levels. Like nobody saw that one coming.
Yeah.
So, but there was just like 6 different types of corals in there, and so. You know, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't really care about grams when I'm looking at my corals. Like, oh, it grew 50% more grams. Like, I don't really care. Yeah. So, like, what if the coral skeleton was just denser? Like, is it worth, trying to maintain those high levels? I don't know.
Uh-huh.
So, one of the things we wanted to do is take it to the next level, and let's set up some tanks. So we set up 2 tanks. The rocks work here is roughly the same. And we placed the corals, identical samples of the corals. Worldwide Corals was kind enough to send out I don't know, probably about 30 different corals for each tank, 2 of each. We put them in the same spots, and we're just gonna let these corals grow out. So we're just going to let these 2 tanks grow out. We'll look at them at 3, 6, 9 months, a year. Actually, I've been trying to get this episode out right now to give a side-by-side comparison, because we're at probably 3 months right now.
I would imagine.
Eric,
pretty close.
3 months? 2.5 months?
Almost
all right,
3.
so we're right up on there. And I can tell you, I went through one by one on all of these corals and just kind of looking at them directly. And definitely the high elevated elements are growing way faster. I mean, you can see it, in the initial view of it is the elevated elements are encrusting the bases onto the rock already, where these are just approaching that decision. So I want to get that episode out right now soon so you can see that. But the big tell will be like a year. At a year, do I have a bunch of frags or do I have a reef tank?
Yeah, that's true.
And if I do, if it's that big of a difference, I am absolutely willing to run some higher levels. I may scale back when growth is no longer desirable and I just want to maintain a nice looking tank. But during growth phase, or if I was doing a frag system, I think that would probably be pretty attractive.
So would there be anything to consider at running at those higher levels that you might want to, I don't know. So we've always said, middle of the road type places is where you want to be, so you're not on the edge of creeping over this way and not on the low end, so you're not on the edge of crashing over here. So that's why we usually shoot for like 8.5, 9. But at 12, you're kind of running that rail, but if you have more control.
Good point, because it's like, driving a Viper versus a Corolla. I'm gonna go faster, man, for sure. But like if I hit an ice patch, I'm dead. So you're definitely riding the edge, which means you need a more skilled driver to make sure that everything else is right,
that makes sense.
And that you're not just wildly going up and down as well.
Yeah.
So, and there's other things, man. We're just learning here, and you're hopefully learning right with us. There's some things in there, man, just because it's growing faster doesn't mean it's actually metabolically healthier, per se. It doesn't mean that it's also healthy for the fish to have alkalinity that high. We don't know that one way or another. So there's definitely unknowns there that when you're starting to go outside of the window for, natural seawater parameters or close to. But the nature of this is everybody's looking for faster growth and better coloration. So let's see if we can find it, and then you can learn one step at a time. Just keep adding knowledge on top.
I think some of those with more and more of these like alkalinity checkers or these constant alkalinity testers like the Neptune Trident and the GHL and all of these other ones, this might be more feasible for some people to do since they have an active finger on the pulse of alkalinity, where they're not having to manually test at the same time every day, and it might be easier to run some of these
if you
numbers.
actually had a readout. And this is a good time to point out that Randy has a Trident. I didn't get one, and we're going to share a booth at Reef to Reef with David from Reef to Reef, who also has one, but somehow I get left out of the mix. So.
If Terrence is watching, I didn't say it. I wasn't supposed to. I was supposed
to be an
impartial party. No, I was supposed to be an impartial party, but I haven't got it yet. We'll see.
I told Terrence I want the final version. Otherwise, I don't want to give my opinion based on the non-final for my opinion. But I can't wait for that kind of thing to show up.
Yeah, for sure.
And definitely give you an easier window to maintain anything that's slightly outside of the normal levels, and try to keep it in there. So let's see if we got any questions related to this thing, specifically. Either, our approach to the test or our approach to... the actual results.
Edward here is asking, how do you acclimate, and this is a really good question, how do you acclimate new colonies of SPS where, say, you got it from the LFS where they were growing at 8.2, and now you have an elevated tank of 11 DKH or 12 DKH? How would you go about acclimating?
That'd be pretty tough to acclimate them up without other tanks. You're probably going to let a little bit more hope and pray. You could... I would say acclimation, that day is probably more important now. You know, like when you're drip acclimating your coral. Like I know a lot of people just kind of take it out of the bag and put it in.
That's me.
And so in that instance, if you're going to be way outside those parameters, slowly getting it used to that is probably wise. Maybe even the course of hours. But one of the things to think about when you're doing that is to make sure that it's the same temperature.
Yeah.
Because if you're just dripping it in there off it, and it's getting cold during that period of time.
Yeah, true. Okay.
All right. What's the other one here? Okay. Going through a pretty bad bacterial bloom in my new tank, almost for weeks now. Is there any way to fix? Andrew Jones. This is a really good one, actually. I love to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Because the tank up front, the XXL 750 from the hybrid series, is definitely got a bacterial bloom in it as well. And I don't think I shared this with you, but I called WWC about it. I talked to Josh, and he just chuckled at me. He's like, "Yep, that's bare bottoms for you, man." And that actually fits really good with the ULMs we did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because those had like ebbing and flowing bacterial blooms for like the first year, and then now they're just good, right?
That's true.
And that was the exact advice that Josh gave. And he's like, dude, for the first year, a bare bottom tank sucks. It's just really hard to take care of. There's bacterial blooms that appear. It's super, super common. They can stay for months. And what will happen, man, is a painful first year, and then every year after that, success. Whereas the every year after that with sand is challenges. So, and I know some people will, debate that a little bit, but keep talking about that sand on the bottom as the tank's toilet, where all the the waste and everything decays down in there.
Ticking time bomb almost.
Yeah, I think I'm going to change the statement that I used there. It's no longer the toilet, man. It's the kitty litter box, man. Because the toilet implies that it gets flushed out at some point in time.
Okay, true.
This thing just collects more and more poo and garbage, man, until finally, it erupts on you.
Okay, all right.
And so it erupts if you go to the corner and you stir it up, man, and brown comes out of everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so... yeah, so you get different types of challenges from year point one when you have sand in there. And I'll still openly admit that half of my tanks in the future will probably still have sand just because aesthetically it's something I like. I just might take different approaches to keeping it clean or whatnot. But with the bare bottom approach, it just opens just as it says it like it is, man. It's going to be harder for a year. The tank is stabilizing. In fact, what happened was it stabilized and cleared up. And then we added a bunch more fish.
That's true.
Elliot over at Marine Collector sent us some fish.
A bunch more fish.
We added a bunch of fish, and then boom, new bacterial thing because it needs to stabilize around the new biological load in there. And, there's no sand. There's just so much surface area and sand to, process the bacterial load. So much area for it to settle out in and different critters to eat it up inside there.
So so I've seen this question a lot on BRStv is the same type of thing. Got a bacterial bloom, what do I do? And a lot of people, I think probably 60% of the answers is run UV. And then another part of the answers is dose some bacteria like Dr. Tim's or something. And the other one, some people have even mentioned like dosing straight nitrate or dosing ammonia or dosing something to clear them out. Like if you wanted to get rid of them, what would be your approach? Just ride it out still?
Ride it out, man. So I would say here's the thing, man. Everybody treats reefing like here's a problem, find a hammer.
Yeah, that's true.
Just because you have a nail, you need a hammer.
Yeah.
And maybe, man, but ultimately we didn't do that with the ULMs, and we just let them do their thing, and now they don't have any bacterial or blooms ever, right? And so let that thing stabilize around the fish and stuff that are in there, and leave it alone. The problem is like you catch the better mousetrap, man. I think of that one poem, like she swallowed the fly to catch the rat to eat the spider to whatever it was. I totally butchered that, but you just go down this ever evolving escalation of ways to deal with a tank. And so when I talked to Josh about it, he's like, yeah, so you could throw a UV on there if you want, and it would clear up. But we just usually let it go.
Well, that, and I mean, you're throwing usually like a $200 to $400 to $500 piece of equipment at a problem that will eventually probably work itself out. And whether or not you decide to, if you see value in running it all the time, like we have the 160 that we have a UV, we don't run it all the time. The purpose of the UV on the ULM's SPS tank was to run it all the time, and as a preventative more than anything else. So if you find value in that, then I mean maybe buy it, but.
I think that the biggest problem here is you see your tank, you come home, the thing's got a bacterial bloom, and you're like, oh man, I must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm a terrible reefer, poor me.
Yeah.
And then I need to fix it. I need to solve this problem. And the reality is actually more beneficial if somebody comes by and says, you know what, you got a bare bottom, man, that's normal.
It's natural.
You could treat it if you want. If you're not in a hurry, man, just let it ride it out. Maybe it goes away in a week, maybe it goes away in 6 weeks, but it will go away. And if you're in a really big hurry, man, then it's not causing any harm in the tank other than visually it doesn't look good.
Same with ugly tank syndrome, or that brown tank, the new brown tank syndrome.
Oh, yeah, actually,
a lot of people think they're doing something bad because they have algae, but no, it's good. It's a good thing.
I mean, you get a little bit of a preview of probably what's coming up next week, actually, here, because that was the same thing. Is the ULM, the 170 in my office, is it's just covered in brown slime as soon as we turn the light on, And like they're like, should we clean it off? And I'm like, no, often when you clean it off, it just spreads and stuff. Let it do its thing,
Ugly brown.
And then one day, man, I'm like, I think it's been long enough, blow it off. Blew it off, didn't come back.
Yeah.
Same thing in the XXL 750 up
That's
top.
true.
It's covered in brown slime intentionally. Never touched it. Let the bacteria do their thing and form the biofilm that they need to form. And then blow it off one day, and then it was fine.
Yeah.
So if we didn't add more fish and screw it all up again,
we would have been sailing into coralline.
Yeah, just fine. Actually, it's covered in coralline right now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the bottom and the rock is already. So, those are good signs. Things going in the right direction.
Cool.
So, yeah, I don't know. Those are my answers for you. And let's go to the next one here. Mark
wants to know, what are you keeping the alkaline calcium at? So we kind of went through this, and I don't. Oh, you have to rattle off the numbers off the top of your head, though.
Aaron ran away.
The numbers were around on the high tank. It was somewhere around like 12 DKH and 4.
It's the blue bucket versus black bucket.
I mean, there you go. That's the easiest way to look.
Go to the Red Sea website and look at blue bucket versus black bucket. It isn't blue bucket and black bucket salt. It's just those parameters. Because those are some of the most popular salts that people pick up here. We just, elevated, not elevated, it just seemed like made sense to pick those as parameters. These tanks are actually running Tropic Marin, but we elevate the levels up to there or leave it down. So it isn't the salt versus the salt. It's just those are the examples. So
good point.
The biggest thing is I think it's like 8 DKH versus 12. So do I need a skimmer if I'm running a refugium? Oh, it's interesting. So, that is a good question. If you're running a refugium and it is pulling out presumably all of the nutrients,
which they probably can.
Yep, I know they can.
Yeah.
And even if it's well lit, even a small, poorly designed refugium can be nearly 100% efficient to the point that you maybe want to scale it back. And what a weird how that conversation has changed, man. It used to be like, refugium's garbage. It doesn't work.
It's just for display purposes, like maybe in growing pods. That was its main purpose. Well, no, actually, it's better than.
Turns out, if you light it with a light like you would light your tank, it can actually outcompete nutrients in the tank in your sump. Yeah. You did it with a $5 bulb.
There's the hammer. There's the hammer beating the solution to death. Is like refugium will knock out all of it. Like get rid of GFO, get rid of carbon dosing, all that, because we know those are hammers for phosphates and nitrates. Here's a ball of Kato, and it will do it all in one shot, and probably more efficiently than you thought.
And pH and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So like sometimes I get totally surprised. So when we did that first experiment, I'm like, I think the message is probably going to be in here, like, it will remove half of it.
Yeah.
Which to me is half the water changes. Sweet. I mean, that's it. I'll grow a ball of algae and do half my water changes now, right? Then when you found out it's like 100%.
Yeah.
Whoa. Wow. But in relation to that with the skimmer, so I would say that the skimmer is going to do two things. One, gas exchange,
Yes.
right? So it's going to keep all of the gases in equilibrium with the air around the skimmer.
Do you think it does that more so than just turn over the water and churning of the water on the top and then
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you think about surface area on the surface of the tank versus the surface area of all of those tiny little bubbles inside the reactor, man, there's so much air water surface area for the gas exchange to happen. It's like the old analogy of a tablespoon of carbon. It looks like a bunch of little black rocks on there, but if you actually look at a microscope, it's like a honeycomb material, and total surface area, 1 tablespoon of carbon.
I don't know.
It's a football field.
Is it really?
Yeah, 1 tablespoon of carbon. If you actually flattened out all the surface area, it'd be an entire football field.
Wow.
But microscopic. Same thing with all those little bubbles.
Yeah.
If the amount of air-water interface is happening inside the skimmer, so way more than is happening on the surface, and that's why actually you can scrub all the CO2 out with the CO2 scrubber media going into your skimmer, and it'll actually increase the pH of your tank, even if the CO2 is high in the air around the tank, which is interfacing with the top. So it works even there. So definitely the skimmer. So you're going to get air exchange. You're also going to remove the waste before it breaks down into nitrate and other undesirable elements, right?
Yeah.
So like it's nitrate and phosphorus, but it's fish food, man. There can be all kinds of things in fish food. It could be copper or whatever in there. In fact, if you look at the back of the bottle, a lot of them will say that kind of stuff. So, small amounts, but it builds up over time, especially if you don't have a super awesome water change schedule. So like, it's just nice to be able to remove the uneaten food and fish poo and whatnot before it actually breaks down. I'd say the filter sock is the only thing that is going to remove it. It has the potential anyway to remove it 100% before it breaks down at all.
Because it gets stuck in there.
Yeah, it just gets stuck in there. And like if you have like a roller mat, it will pull it out in real time. If you replace the filter socks every 2 or 3 days, it will probably also catch it. At least to the BRS Investigates we did on it. And so then behind that, once it breaks down into small organic particles, the skimmer will remove it before it breaks down into nitrogen and phosphorus, elements. So yes, there's benefit to it. Do you absolutely need a skimmer? No.
I mean, if your purpose is to target nitrates and phosphates specifically, the refugium is all you need. You don't need it.
Come to think of it, though, the one tank that they run without a skimmer at WWC is the one that has sand.
The 293. Yeah, that's right.
So it has sand. The sand's performing a lot of filtration properties, and they don't have a skimmer.
And when there's a lot less flow in the display, which you would imagine probably leads to less amount of the water column inside being churned up and going down the overflow, because they run a slow flow rate to begin with. So maybe the less water gets over the edge because they're churning up less water inside. I don't know.
I would just say that like every one of these pieces of equipment adds stability and redundancy to the tank. So if any one thing goes wrong, like pump falls down and blows your sand all over the place, and all of a sudden the kitty litter box has exploded into the tank, your skimmer is going to help compete with that and add redundancy to the life support system in your tank. So no, don't need a skimmer. Especially if you have a poorly performing skimmer that like doesn't really work unless you're tuning it every 10 seconds. I just unplug that thing and move on with life. If it's a good one, man, and it works without a lot of tweaking, then I would personally run it for sure. So, and you don't need a super expensive one either. And sometimes the more expensive ones actually have more air-water interface and like seem to be more finicky. Sometimes the cheap ones actually work the best. What else we got here?
There's a lot of people, just to comment, for those of you joining us, yes, we are in a large space. You can tell by the echo. And that's because we're in the testing lab. So it's big, giant, wide open stuff.
So all along here is a whole bunch of E170s that Red Sea was kind enough to give us. Over here is some tanks that they filled with corals from WWC for the elevated versus normal element experiments we're running. We got for flow, we got the Radions and the XR or the MP10s, in there.
Yeah.
And that's a good lead-in actually to the other series of experiments that are going back here.
Us.
We got redundant tanks back here where we're testing flow. So with the flow, we have 2 MP10s on the side of this thing and 2 of them.
Yeah.
And then we have 2 more tanks that have 4, right? Yeah. And so I want to know, is it worth it? I mean, visually, I feel like I invested more in this tank. It must be worth it. I'm doing something better. But is it? Is it worth the money? Are we really getting anything out of it? Because if we're not, let's go back to 2 pumps. You know, I guess there's some redundancy and stuff of having 4, but like, so we're gonna have double the flow. Both of the MP10s are cranked 100%, so we're gonna, you know, on the reef press mode. So we're gonna have double the flow in there. And in this case, man, the guys over at ORA were kind enough to join in with BRStv Investigates. So if ORA you're watching, thank you very much for helping us out. And they provided some of the magnitude of 30. Oh man, there must have been like 100 frags in there. I think there's 30 frags in each one of these things, so maybe 120. So they sent us 120 frags so that we can learn whether or not the added flow actually produces added results. And so, are you spending your money on anything good? Because if you're not, spend it somewhere else. You know, maybe you want to buy a different skimmer. Maybe you want to go bowling. In either case, whatever, you know, it brings more value to your life. Yeah. If it ain't working in the tank, man, let's not do it. Because, you know, there's a lot of reasons to believe. And I know that in an experiment, you know, Dana Riddle produced a lot of results with added flow. But that's kind of like that same experiment realm where, yeah, I can measure a frag and the frag actually weighs more. But I guess that's kind of what this is too. But we'll see visually. And then the next test, man, we'll turn these things into actual reef tanks. And presumably if it produces results, let's throw it in actual reef tanks that look very similar side by side and grow these things up and see if one tank actually produces extra results that are worth the investment. And some of this stuff takes a while to do, but you know, it's fun to watch anyway.
Well, I mean, you're talking with the elevated alk, we're like a 3-month, 6-month, 9-month, and 12-month update. So, you know, upwards of a year for some of these things. But
I mean, like, we're just gonna run these 2 tanks here, man, probably for 18 months, I bet.
Just,
you know, like,
just running them.
I mean, just to find out whether or not having, you know, elevated elements actually produces results. And you know, like, I know it is crazy when you say it out loud, but like it's super expensive too, man. I just gotta say, like, having Aaron take care of this is probably why you never see this kind of thing before, because I mean, there just aren't a lot of places that can put that kind of resources into it, and the only reason we can is because you guys care. If you didn't care, there is no way that the leadership team here would say yes when I say, hey, you know what we should do? They'd actually just fire me. So because you guys care, man, thank you. Give us our dream job. And Aaron, man, gets to take care of tanks all day. So, I don't know. So that's why we're in this room. Actually, behind you is a whole bunch of all the tests for doing all the salt mixes tests that we're doing. Yeah,
you guys probably saw that in the last salt video or one of the last ones that I did, where we tested if they could store over time, and then you got a picture into what these wall tanks look like, and they're all behind it. I just started another test today, and I start another test tomorrow. That's 16 tanks with the 8 salts that we're testing with all new tests.
So many. We also have all the Vertex tanks over there, and then a whole nother row of the Red Sea tanks.
Just like these.
And soon, and I think we're going to get 2 more rows of Red Sea tanks up the middle here. I mean, there's going to be experiment wazoo going on, because that's the stuff I think is the most interesting. I mean, we've talked about, like, you know, what carbon does enough.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like,
or another build series or something like that.
Build series are fun too, man, but like, and how many different ways can you see a glass box with corals in it? You know, like, let's like up our game, man, and find out how to do it better instead of just saying, you know, use more flow. You know, does more flow actually do something? Because I want to know.
I don't know.
You know, and then the Vertex tanks over there, there's 2 side-by-side tanks that are running those pH tests too. So one of them's running at like a completely stable 8.3 all day, every day. And the other one's running at 7.8 all day, every day. So let's find out the answer, whether or not, you know, pH even matters. And I can tell you right now that it's consuming way more calcium and alkalinity in the high pH one.
Yeah,
I haven't actually weighed it, so it's hard to say. But like, we're gonna find out, and we're gonna share it.
I mean, the control measures on that pH is pretty cool. Like, to keep it at 7.8 when in a room that probably wants it to rise up to 8.2 naturally, you put some CO2 in there to keep it at a steady level. And the opposite of the other one, like in a room that wants to bring the pH down, you scrub it out and make it 8.3, but just baseline pH.
Scrub it out.
It's cool stuff.
So let's see, we got another one here. How do you guys decide if you have the right flow for a tank? Okay, so at this point for me, if it's an SPS tank, I know I have enough flow when like the sand won't stay in place.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll remove the sand in many cases. I know when I got enough flow, when all my pumps are at 100% and everything isn't getting like directly blasted. Like in fact, I don't think you can really have too much until the corals say, stop it, stop it, don't do this to me anymore.
Yeah, which is easy to see like rather quickly if they're in trouble or growing in the way of the flow. And even at some point, like if you start with frags and you have a pump that's up here and a frag that's down here, as it grows, if it's getting too much flow, you'll kind of see it veer away from that direct flow too.
Yeah, so this one's really interesting because for me personally, this one's this weird mix of, there's some scientific data out there, experiments and stuff. Again, thank you, Dana Riddle, for doing all that. That points that in that direction. And then also, there is like every wholesaler or grower of corals says flow matters more than light. Light's super easy. I get the par right. It's getting enough flow, man. And you're like, well, just water flow? But flow is like the lifeblood of the system. It's where it carries every nutrient in and out. It, flushes the gas exchange off the surface of the coral, allows the coral to, pull in different nutrients, let other nutrients out. And the more flow you get, the more metabolic, the better the metabolic health of the coral. So we don't know that. Like, I'd say there's so much anecdotal and a little bit of scientific evidence to say that we wanted to find out here, and we're doing it in redundant tanks. I just really, 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 really want to get past as many of the anecdotal things as we can. You know, a good one was actually the whole like T5 thing, man.
Oh, how long with the bulbs? On how long you need to? Do you need to change them out?
Yeah.
I mean, that's that could be a combination of people saying, I don't know. The most thing I heard. So when I run T5s, I ran T5s for when I first started all the way up until I'll probably still run T5s, but in a hybrid type situation. And all I heard was change your bulbs at like 8 months, no more than a year, because the spectrum shifts. And for some reason, everybody started experiencing, or people would tie their algae problems into not changing out their bulbs. And that was like on top of like, hey, your phosphates are too high or too low. What else is causing my algae? Oh, you run T5s. When was the last time you changed your bulbs? Like, that was one of the first questions.
So many things like that we've all been saying and regurgitating to each other forever, you know? And it was the spectrum changes and shifts over time, and they get dim or whatever. And so we tested these things, and I forget exactly where we stopped. I think it was like a 18-month, basic usage.
Simulated like 18 months or 2 years.
Running 24 hours a day. And the spectrum shift that happened in these bulbs over the course of that many used hours was so infinitesimal. There's no way the human eye could possibly catch that.
Yeah.
And so over, and like even biology.
Well, it would be like taking your Radion schedule and taking one slider of a spectrum range and changing it by 2% or 5% or some 2%.
Nothing.
Like nothing.
And so like if that is what causes algae or not causes algae, is that 2% on one slider of an LED.
LEDs
we
are done.
All screwed. Like, there's no one out there setting these things right.
Right.
You know, like, there's no way. So there's just a tiny, tiny thing. And the second thing was, anecdotally, it looks yellow. But you know what also happens over the course of a year in a reef tank that makes it yellow?
The water just starts to turn yellow if you're not running carbon.
The cat box is getting full,
Exactly.
man, at the bottom. So, like, anecdotally, the tank looks more yellow over time, but, like, it doesn't mean it's the lights, because it ain't the lights, or at least all the bulbs that we tested wasn't that.
Yeah.
And the drop off in power actually was really minimal too. So
well, initially it was like if you want to change your bulbs in like what was it like a month or 2 months where there was an initial drop in that power loss, just to maintain that higher level of power, then I mean, by all means buy more bulbs. But then it just pretty much flattened
buy
out.
$100 worth of bulbs, no, like $200 worth of bulbs every month. Then you can maintain the max, or you just buy like one extra bulb, or two, I guess a pair, and just let it be depleted, and run the things forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. We try to get to the bottom of these anecdotal stuff, man, because sometimes what feels right to us, like all it needs to be is like kind of plausible. Yeah, me too. And then enough of us say me too together, and all of a sudden it becomes fact, and it just isn't.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. The flow thing maybe is fact. Let's find out. We definitely found like the same thing with the refugium. We thought the refugium was fact, that it just barely worked, had to be super huge mega. Nope, just needs more energy going in the top. More energy in the top produces better.
Right. Yeah. Even some of the in the refugium, in the case of refugium, even some of the compact fluorescent bulbs from the hardware store, or the hang-on refugium was a surprise to me that it actually did to some degree pull out some nitrates and phosphates. And was it as much as like a horticulture specific light? No, not really. And the pH differences was astronomical between the horticulture light versus some little CFL bulb, but there was still something to it.
So I had my first tank. Some of you have seen pictures of it. It's like a 90-gallon tank.
Yeah.
And right behind it was some high windows, and I had a little hang-on CPR fuge, but it got direct sunlight. It faced south, so it got all day long sunlight, and it grew Cato like mad, man. But high energy, way better than a little dumb bulb. And eventually I just took the light off and let it
sun was
grow,
enough.
Yeah, during the day. And so, absolutely. All right, let's see what else we got here.
It says, how are you keeping your pH at 8.3? Higher DKH or CO2 scrubber? Good question, Todd. Some of these aren't popping up here, just some technical difficulties, but we're seeing them over here, and Todd is asking, how do we keep it? Specifically for the higher pH, we are scrubbing with a solenoid, or we're using a CO2 scrubber attached to a skimmer that's in the back of each of the tanks, and then a solenoid that toggles off and on based off of pH. So it'll allow air through the scrubber when it's below a certain pH set point, and then when it's above, it just draws ambient air. And then the hysteresis between that is tight enough to where we can keep it at 8.3. So
that's super easy, man. Actually, the media, and we're looking actually to elevate that. After this one of the things we want to know is, can we recirculate the air through the media?
That's
so
cool.
The media will last like almost forever, and see if there's no effects on both the skimmer and the tank. And I don't think there will be. So
cool.
It'll be really cheap to do this as well, which is like the holy grail. Can I increase growth rates and at almost no cost? Yeah, me too. I went in. And so, what else we got here? What kind of flow are you using on your elevated tanks? So all of these, we're using MP10s on them. There's just two of them opposed on reef crest mode.
Yeah, I think they're set to like 80% or somewhere around there.
I think they're actually 100.
Yeah.
I think almost all of them are at 100. But we're just using the pumps that Ecotech was. This is super expensive to do. If you can imagine, like, each one of these tanks has got a Radion, some XR. Like the tank itself, is like a couple grand, or like $1,500, something like that. Neptune is giving us auto water changes because I got to make this easy. If we had to actually do water changes on 8 million tanks here, it wouldn't happen on time, and it would be something that was kind of a bit of a flyer, but now I know it's happening in real time. So Neptune gave us the auto water changes, and of course an Apex to run it. So, just in this row here is probably 20 grand in stuff that they donated, to help us help you guys. And I know you guys aren't going to run out and buy Apex stuff just because they put this on there, but hopefully they get a little bit of respect. Hopefully the Ecotech people get some respect. Hopefully the Red Sea people do, and
ORA
WWC. Now, WWC.
Yeah.
Everybody is taking part because, man, there's people that just sell you stuff, and then there's people that give back to the community, and these guys are doing their part, man, to help. And just for your reference point, the answer is, and I don't call them up and beg them, their answer is yes, always. Without question, they want to help the community whenever they can. So hopefully get a little bit of credit. But yeah, we're using MP10s on here. Also, for me, MP10s would probably, even if I had to pay for them, would probably be what it would be because I need to, we're
The maintenance.
the maintenance on here. We got so much work to take care of all these tanks. Tex is taking care of a whole slew of marketing tanks now. It's a full-time job.
Yeah.
So if you can just swap out those heads and soak them all together, and then next time swap them again.
You just saved yourself paying him. Like,
If you
for
had
an
to
hour.
actually unwind all of these or soak them at the tanks, it would be a nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
So just being able to pull all the wet sides out, soak them all together, and swap them out, and you can do maintenance on all of these tanks in 10 minutes, and they're like brand new when he's done. So that is definitely what we're using.
We do have a question, Marcio, or I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Can you guys send the light set color for what you have on the tanks behind you? Actually, we're running the AB Plus spectrum from the Ecotech, the EcoSmart Live from the dashboard. So there is in the templates, you can find the templates and you can find the Coral Lab templates, and then there's like AB Plus, there's a couple different AB Pluses, and there are a couple different ones in there, and we're running the AB Plus spectrum on all of these, and that's just for I think like 8 hours a day or what have you like that. And then you just basically we set the intensity with a par meter, so you can run the AB Plus spectrum on any of these lights, but it's really important, more so important probably, to take your par meter and make sure that you're within the par ranges that you're aiming for too.
So by all means, if you're going to spend years of your time, buy all these expensive lights, buy all the expensive corals, rent the par meter for $50, man, and
you only need it once. Like once you set it
up, man.
be done.
Like I say that as the person that rents par meters, but to be honest, man, I'm pretty certain that still we don't make any money on those things after shipping them back and forth for free. And it's really just kind of a service. But if you're going to sell, somebody buys 4 of these things for a tank and you're going to sell $3,200 worth of lights. I think, man, like we owe it to people to help them set it up successfully, and not just sell something, but actually achieve results with it. So Bob scolds me in the amount of crap that we had to do here to be able to account properly for rental stuff. I don't know, it was a big holdup, but like
worth it all.
Absolutely, man. Like I want, it's. Lighting with T5s, you should be plug it in the wall and be success. Now you got questions about what spectrum, and everybody's had so much failure with so many spectrums. Like you see it on the video. Sorry for picking on you, but you see it on a video, you're like, oh, well, I want that one because it's working for those guys, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, actually, if the Ecotech guys were smart, the thing would kick out AB Plus by default and like wouldn't even allow you to pick anything else. And if you went off of it, it said like, Wayne, danger, you're entering like death mode. And, you're a trailblazer, you may be successful, you may not.
Play around at your own risk.
Check AB Plus. I can guarantee Spectrum won't be your problem. If it said that, nobody would go off. Only the trailblazers would go off at that point. And because of that, like way more people between the AB Plus and using a par meter to get into the range that you're looking for. Success, no, light is not your problem. Light will never be the reason you didn't have success. Right?
Which was one of the things like metal halides and T5s I think had over LEDs is it wasn't a problem because all you had to do was like, hey, put a 4 bulb or 6 bulb over your tank, plug that thing in. There are some options, but you go to look at all these other tanks and you say, well, what T5 bulbs are running? Well, there's something like a handful of different options and different configurations. So it made it really easy to choose whatever bulbs you're going to do, plug it in, and you walk away. And now you're worried about if my tank's not looking right. Is it water? Is it is it parameters? Is it flow? Is it this and that? You don't have to think
easiest
about
tank
light.
for sure that I ever lit was using those tech fixtures from Sunlight Supply.
Okay.
I wish they still made them. They don't. But like for sure, those are the easiest things. You put some bulbs in there and walk away. It was cheap. It wasn't super expensive. It wasn't the like most efficient reflectors and whatnot. But like, hey man, rather than spend $300 extra on the fixture, I'll buy $40 in bulbs.
Yeah.
And the things last me 18 months. So like, I don't know, man. Like I long for the days and you can just plug it in the wall and be successful. And there's no reason it can't be that way now. I mean, the technology here, man, you should be able to put in there. I have a 120-gallon tank, and it should say how many of these things are you putting on there, what are you keeping, and set it for you. There's no reason it shouldn't be that easy.
I mean, if I have the Radion over a 4 foot, 4 foot 120 gallon tank here, and then Joe over in Washington has a 4 foot 120 gallon tank with the same Radion placed in pretty much the same configuration, like our differences in par should be nothing. Really.
Nothing, man.
Yeah.
Nothing. And like I'm going to guarantee this. I'm going to go. I think next 18 months somebody does it. I'm going to go on record. I think.
Cool. Mark it down. April 1st.
Just because actually behind the scenes they all know this.
Yeah.
They all know that should be the expectation.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to do it. Because it is not that hard to measure the par in a glass box. Using like a few different configurations and just put it into there. Yeah. I mean, you got all this technology in your phone and stuff. It's just super easy, man.
Well, so tank sizes are standard. There's a lot of standard tank sizes, and once you get past like all of the standard sizes, if you've got this special tank that's sort of in between, it's not this one, it's not that one. You can infer pretty dang close using what is there as set points that yours is probably here or there, and if it's not, try the other one.
I'm going to go one step farther, and I'm sorry for all the lighting people that may be watching this, but if your product requires somebody to buy a $500 meter to be able to use it properly, you failed. Like, no, there's no other way to say it, man. I mean, maybe when, we were, 5 years ago, or 8 years ago, or wherever, when the first ones came out and nobody really knew what they were doing and they're just gluing LEDs to a board and hoping for the best, we're just trying to figure it out. Maybe then. But in the world that we live in today, if you require a $500 meter to be successful in common aquarium shapes, failure. End of story. So somebody is going to solve that in the next 18 months. I don't know who it will be, but like somebody has to, man, because behind the scenes at Beers, I am berating these poor guys as well, and they know, man, they know. All right, what else do we have? Cool. I can't read this one. When will the
iGoby. So if you guys are watching our site today, we have a brand new product on the site. It's the iGoby. It's the robotic sand cleaner, I believe, in which case it's out today for a very exclusive price. But it's also April Fool's, so Hey, thanks for playing along, Louie.
Yeah, dude, that was pretty cool. Do marine pier blocks ever go bad or work indefinitely?
Oh, that's a good question that we can add into one of those Ask BRStv questions that we were going to ask. But do they ever go bad? I don't know if they would say they'd go bad, but they get clogged. They can get clogged. Like depending on where you put them in the sump and the detritus that's flowing through there and all of this, you start to reduce available surface area as the pores get clogged. So if you want to call that going bad, maybe, I don't know, or you shake them every once in a while and clean them off or what have you. I don't know.
I know I read that Brightwell recommends replacing them every like 5-6 years. I mean, in all honesty, I don't know if I've ever used Marine Pure in any tank for 5 to 6 years, but I don't know. I don't know why they would actually even say to replace it at that point. I can tell you that I've used both now, and for whatever reason, man, I always thought like the Brightwell bricks were just like a Me Too product, like
there's differences for sure.
For sure. Like there's a couple of them, right? One, man, like you'll know it when you touch it. The Marine Pure brick kind of crumbly in your hands. You got to be real careful with
enough pressure. I can squeeze it.
Oh, you could crush it. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so you got to be a little careful with it. The Marine Pure block or the Brightwell blocks, the export bricks, they're hard. So they're much harder, and the pores seem to be smaller in it, and they got the little dimple things. But to me, the fact that it's harder means it's going to deteriorate less. And I know that back in the day, many years ago, they had a batch that wasn't baked long enough.
Yeah, you can still Google and get those results if you're looking at reviews for them, but that was years ago, I think, a couple years ago or so, somewhere around there.
I think it was like 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they didn't bake it long enough, and that's the big difference here. Actually, is one of them. I think the Marine Pier, they've just baked the ceramic media, and with the the export stuff, it's actually chemically cured.
Yeah.
So they chemically and bake it at both, but at much lower temperatures. And part of that process actually binds up some of the impurities that may be in ceramic media, like aluminum and stuff. I'd love to get to BRStv Investigates on those claims, but
it's a big one.
For me, just the fact that it's harder and the little bricks stack on top of each other and have the dimples that provide flow.
Yeah. I do like those.
I think they would be the ones that I would use in most cases, especially like even if you're going to use the little balls and stuff. They tend to rub eeach other. In fact, if any of you have been watching this for a really long time, I did one on. It
was like instead of bio balls, there was the ceramic media
balls. But I did it in an airlift tower on chopping up your rose bubble tip anemones, right?
Oh yeah.
And so what happened actually is over time, the air bubbles actually cause the things to move against each other, and the marine Pier just turned into dust, right? And so I don't know. I can't tell you that the Brightwell wouldn't do that, but to me, hardness is something that matters at this point. So some of it's fear factor. Some of it is form factor as well. Yeah. So like those plates are really convenient that Marine Pier makes to slide between baffles.
Yeah, because they have a 1-inch thick plate that's like 8 by 8 by 1 inch thick, and those will fit into a lot of many people's baffles pretty well. And you can even break them in half and then put them in one in each baffle.
One of the other things, we're going to go on this Brightwell tour here, is they put sulfur and like GFO into them. And the first time, the sulfur one's pretty interesting because it's going to provide a carbon source, for the denitrification in there. We haven't tested that or anything like that, but the other one was actually interesting. They have these little guys that are covered in GFO, right? And first take out, man, why would I want that? I'm just gonna have to throw these things away. As soon as the GFO is depleted, I'm gonna have to throw it away. And then I talked to the guys over there, like, why would I want to use this? And he's like, well, the cool thing about it is you can use it for like a couple of months and then you can throw them away. So the reason I didn't like it was the reason that
that's what it's for.
So you don't need a reactor, you don't need to be tumbling stuff. You just have this tremendous amount of surface area that's covered in the GFO powder that takes all the phosphate out of the water, and once it's depleted, you just remove them and throw them away.
I mean, that leads to the whole purpose of tumbling GFO anyway, is to make sure that all the surface area is available, but also to keep it from binding together
and stuff. I don't have to buy a reactor. I don't have to run a pump and consume electricity and all that kind of stuff. So I haven't actually used those little cubes with the GFO covered in them, but it was so funny. The reason that I didn't like them was the reason they're like, yeah, that's why they're nice. And I'm like, oh, well, you know what?
That makes sense.
I'm going to buy into your logic for now. I think I might agree. All right, I got a hard stop here in 8 minutes, so if you got good questions, man, bug Dave with them, and he'll put them up here. So we got a few more left. I see, visual.
Yeah, visual impact aside, are micro bubbles good, bad, or indifferent?
So there's people are doing micro bubble scrubbing and stuff now.
Yeah, I think I first started hearing about it a couple years ago, and I don't know if it became a result of an accident or something where people, either their skimmer was leaking bubbles into a display, but somehow the idea got out there that, or somewhere the idea got out that filling your tank with a ton of micro bubbles, like running an air pump into like your return pump so that it splits it up and spits it out, or there's a whole bunch of different ways that people are kind of doing micro bubbles, but what does that do benefit-wise for the tank? Like, are you effectively skimming or providing air-water interchange or interface inside the display? And do you do it twice a day? And
So I'm not gonna say it didn't work. It doesn't do anything.
I don't know.
But I read I got really interested. Somebody asked once, and I went digging in because it's nerdy and I like that kind of thing. And so 30 pages in, I still hadn't gotten a single reason as to why it would be successful.
Why?
Tons of anecdotal, I do it and it works, right?
Right.
But zero, actual plausible reasons as to why it's going to provide, beneficial effect in the tank. And there's a couple of maybes that were thrown in there, but not a whole lot of, hey man, I really believe that this is what's happening and why you can expect this metabolic effect out of it. And so, I don't know, maybe, definitely what happens when you put all the air in there and you're blowing it around, you're creating kind of a a little bit more velocity or whatnot to the air that's hitting coral tissue and whatnot. They're probably providing more gas exchange, but there's plenty of ways to do that. I don't know. I mean, we could definitely, if everybody was really excited about this one, we could, take some of these Red Sea tanks and micro bubble them, and see what the difference is, because that is not a hard thing to test.
Yeah, true.
And I don't know, man. Maybe.
I don't know what parameters would we test for? The visual growth? Would you test for nitrates, phosphates? Run the gamut of tests.
Here's 2 that are micro bubbled. Here's 2 aren't.
Yeah.
And I will tell you the first thing, man, where you're going to see the difference in almost every one of these tests in terms of coral growth, in health generally shows itself in growth, is in alkalinity consumption.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's, sometimes there's a competing like precipitate or something that can happen from certain different ways you run a tank. But for the most part, if the tank is dropping in alkalinity, it means the corals are growing faster. So something like the Trident would be able to give you like a real-time pulse on whether or not filling your tank full of bubbles is actually producing results.
Well, I mean, it's hard to say that when however, you leave your tank for, like if you're looking at it every day, like I look at my tank every day, and sometimes I think I see growth, sometimes I don't. Your eye's a poor judge of growth if you're looking at it every day. It's like watching water boil. But if you leave for a week or you leave for a couple weeks and you come back, you can really start to notice some differences. But that's like you're getting back to alkalinity is the main thing. Like I can see fluctuations in alkalinity on a daily scale, up and down or what have you. So yeah, for sure, try it in any one of those types of monitoring type alkalinity things.
It might be too something like as weird as if I had mediocre flow, maybe the bubbles help with gas exchange or something it's hitting the coral. So like maybe in high flow it doesn't help as much as medium flow. I'm making stuff up here, but as you're kicking ideas around, that's why maybe it's successful for some, less than others. And like I obviously sound kind of like down on this one, and the reason I get down on any of them is when I haven't heard a real clear, plausible reason as to why, and our hobby runs on plausible. It doesn't even need to be proven. If it's just plausible and then anecdotal whatever supports it, that's true.
A few of them, yeah.
So this one, it's more anecdotal, less even plausible in the beginning. So I don't know. Yeah, they're certainly not agreed upon. What else we got here?
Probably like one more. We got like 3 minutes left.
Okay. Are there any benefits to running ozone every now and then? Whew. Well, I guess it would be kind of like running carbon every now and then, right?
Clean your water.
Yeah. So the big benefit to me, some people might debate this, but the biggest benefit to ozone for me is the tank will never have an odor to it. Like it will never stink like algae or fish poop or anything like that. And the second reason is because you're going to have crystal clear water 100% of the time. The other option is carbon, and carbon will kind of go up and down.
Yeah.
And that means the light intensity is going up and down. One of the tests we did showed that the light drops like 30% between the carbon exchanges in a month or so. And so, your light levels won't go like this. They'll stay, perfect penetration all the time, which could mean, ultimately that you could use 30% less lights, So implementing of ozone, maybe I could use like 2 radions instead of 3 or something. You wouldn't get the same coverage that way, but like it could mean that. It's certainly that you're expending that much money. You want to get as most value out of these things as possible. Other than that, like people say that ozone's or ORP related to ozone is like a, water quality reading, and it's just not.
It's a cool factor. It's cool equipment. It's like a calcium reactor. Like ozone there's so many different, cool gears and options that you could get for this hobby. Do you need all of them? Do you absolutely have to all of them? No, but it's cool.
Yeah, the big thing for me on ozone would be I wouldn't do it in a place where if it went wrong, it filled my house with ozone. I'd probably get like a little ozone monitor or something for it. It smells like lightning, and, it has arguable health benefit, or not benefits, detractors. maybe not even arguable. So you just don't want it to breathe it in the house. It's super easy to remove with carbon because it just reacts instantly with the carbon. But if the carbon's wet, it doesn't, by the way. So like if moisture fills all your carbon bin up and it gets all wet, then it doesn't work anymore. So for me, man, I'd personally just prefer to use carbon in most cases because it's so easy.
Yeah.
And just change it out more frequently. But there are benefits to the ozone that it works 24/7 all the time, and you'll always have crystal clear water. It might be cleaner. I will say if you don't run it perfectly and you use too much, you'll find that your skimmer doesn't work at all. So the benefit is that supposedly your skimmer will work better if you use ozone because it allows some of the molecules to collect and get bigger and be removed easier. However, if you use too much, it changes the polarity of all of the pollutants or the organics in the water, and they actually repel from each other and no longer bind with the bubble. Huh. All right, so we gotta wrap it up here. Let's take one more.
Okay.
I mean,
I've got salt testing to do right after this, but it can wait. For
one more. That's it.
Then
we're gonna go. So. Does the blue spectrum help with algae breakouts?
That's an interesting question. And, I was talking about this on Ask BRStv with somebody who had just a green tank. It was like, this is one of my first saltwater tanks, and not only is it bacterial bloom and the water is just green, but the rocks are green and all this other stuff. And we were looking at the tank, and a lot of people were commenting like, it looked like it looked like the sun was just like the tank was sitting out in the middle of the sun, and that was the lighting choice. And he started talking about it, and he was using like compact fluorescents that you would use in the office and things like that. And then the conversation started to go into, well, what about the spectrum? Like, does this more daylight spectrum, breed algae because it has peaks in the, in the 600s and the reds and like the yellows and things versus more blues on the other side, where a lot of people throughout the years of the hobby just haven't experienced a bunch when they're running a more blue type spectrum. So I know you have a story about the T5 bulbs, or the bulbs over one tank versus the other and what they were growing. Yeah,
I mean, I've told this story before and it's pretty long, but yes, there's definitely a difference in spectrum, both for bacterial things like cyano and then like diatoms and dinos and stuff like that. Like different spectrums will definitely grow things totally different than each other. And a little bit anecdotal, a little supported by science, is plants tend to grow better with some of the red lights. The red light is filtered out by the ocean water, and so a lot of the corals won't even ever see any of the red spectrum. And so a lot of the plants, though, that float on the surface or terrestrial, like grow better with the red light. So there's some reasons to believe that adding other spectrums in the blue could produce more algae. And if you're running an LED, find out, man, because you can just turn it off.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to turn it off forever. You can just adjust, and granted, you need a $500 meter or rent one. But you can adjust your power level to be the same. Up the blues, get rid of the rest, and find out.
Yeah, cool.
All right, man, we're going to wrap it up today. Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of different scenery and some of the tests we're doing. And I guess we'll see you.
We'll be back.
Hey, we're going to see you in Reefapalooza.
Yeah, if you guys are going to Reefapalooza, we're going to be there. We're going to be there at the Reef to Reef booth. And watch for this. We had this little Ask BRStv lemonade stand that you might have seen in some of our. If you guys have been watching our YouTube, I think there was a video that we did, a live stream that we did when we were announcing RAP. But we're with Reef to Reef. We'll be with David David and his wife over there, and Ryan and I will be answering questions. You can come up, say hi, answer some questions. I think we're giving away like a tank and a bunch of other stuff with the tank there.
Yeah, we're giving a Red Sea tank and like all the other, usual crew added in, Apex and hopefully some Ecotech stuff. I think we're getting some Tropic Marine Salt. If you hook it up with the Orphic guy, he's giving away an Orphic thing.
Oh yeah.
I already sent you an email over the weekend.
CoralView talked to me. They're giving up 12 CoralView ICP tests that they're throwing in there too. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. But yes, we are going to be in RAP. So if you got nothing to do and you're kind of like in that Florida area or anywhere, driving distance to Orlando or fly in, we'll be there. Big show. First one of the year.
You can bike in.
You can bike it.
Yeah. All right. See you next week.
See you guys.